It's easier than ever to write a book today, publish it, and call yourself an author. That's thanks to the variety of tools which are free or pretty affordable to use, and also to platforms like Amazon, like ACX, and like Kobo, which make it easier than ever for indie authors to get their work out into the world. But when you start writing a book, you'll quickly discover that although it's easier than ever to self-publish a book, writing a book is still challenging. Hi there, my name is Brian Collins. Welcome to the Become a Writer Today channel. In this video, I'm going to reveal 8 different lessons that I learned through publishing my books. Hope you enjoy the content in this video. If you do, hit thumbs up, and to get more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I've written and published a number of books over the years. I published a 3-part series of books for writers. It's called Become a Writer Today, and it's based on the informational content that I publish on my site, which offers practical writing advice. I also published a kind of a personal memoir about what it was like to become a young dad unexpectedly when I was in my 20s. This was a lockdown project. And I've also written a book about the creative process. And I've even been published in an anthology that was a USA Today bestseller. Now, I don't say this to boast. I'm simply saying this to demonstrate that I've written different types of books. I've made some mistakes, and I've also learned what can work if you want to build a career as an author. So I'm going to reveal 8 different things that I wish I'd known before I decided to write and self-publish my first book. Lesson number 1, write a little bit, but consistently. So when I first tried to earn a living from writing, I was working as a care worker in a nearby hospital. I used to work 12-hour shifts, and at the time we had 2 kids in our family and they were quite small. So I said to myself, I'm going to write on my day off on Saturday or Sunday. So I sit down at my writing desk and I try and write for 3 or 4 hours, or I try and do it during my day off. But invariably, this wouldn't happen because I had other commitments. I had to work for starters, and I also had family commitments, and just day-to-day life would intervene. So then I would put off writing until my next day off, which would be 5 or 6 days away. And then if I missed that day's writing for whatever reason, 2 or 3 weeks could go between writing sessions. It was only when I started to embrace the power of little writing that I was able to make progress on my blog posts and articles, and later on my books. So what does little writing look like? Rather than trying to write for 3 or 4 hours on Saturday or in the evenings after work, instead you're just going to write 200 or 300 words, but you're going to do it 5 or 6 days a week. Anybody can find time to write 200 or 300 words a day because it only takes 15 or 20 minutes. All you have to do is skip that second show on Netflix or get up just a little bit earlier. If you write 300 words a day, you'll have over 2,100 words in a week. Chances are you'll have more because you'll have 1 or 2 writing sessions that will go quite well. Keep that up and you'll have 9,300 plus words in a month. Chances are you'll be over 10,000 words. Keep this up for 3 to 6 months and you will have the first draft of your book. But you'll also have something better than that. You will have a writing habit. And once you have a writing habit, anything is possible. You can build a blog, you can start writing books, and you can take your author career to the next level. And it all starts with writing for 15 or 20 minutes and getting just 300 words a day onto the blank page. Lesson number 2, don't type so much. I used to love the stereotype of a writer, working at moonlight, a candle beside our old Corona typewriter, and clacking away into the wee small hours. Now, I knew I was never going to be able to write on a typewriter, so for a couple of years I actually went through lots of different types of keyboards. I even bought myself a few mechanical keyboards like this one here, which are a joy to type on and which make lots of great noise, which you can hear here. Now, as great as these keyboards are, the reality is if you're an author, nobody cares how exactly you got the words and stories out of your head and onto the blank page. In fact, it's usually far more efficient and productive if you can get the words out of your head through dictation or even through transcription. In fact, when I studied the work habits of really productive authors who had a huge back catalogue, which is something I'll talk about in a moment, I found that they often didn't spend hours hunched over their writing desk or hunched over a typewriter. But P.D. James, like many prolific and effective authors, didn't spend hours hunched over her writing desk. In fact, much like James Patterson, she would often think of an outline for a story or one of her books, transcribe or write down some notes, and dictate it to a secretary or give her notes to a secretary who would type them up. Now, you may be listening to this or watching this thinking, I can't afford a secretary, or that seems like a really weird way to write. And this is why self-publishing is easier than ever. You can use speech-to-text software. It's already in your operating system, or you could use something that costs, a couple of dollars a month, like Dragon Dictate, and dictate into your phone. I guarantee you'll be able to get words out of your head a lot faster. Or you could even go one step further and use a transcription service like Rev, which costs approximately $1.50 per minute. That's probably more suitable if you have a bigger budget and you're already earning from your writing. Now, of course, when you dictate or transcribe something like this, there is going to be mistakes and issues, but think of it like a first draft. You can fix all of those mistakes and issues during the writing process. In fact, you'll be able to dictate thousands of words in an hour or two, the same amount of words that would take a couple of days for most new authors to write. Not only that, but you could actually get your phone and a headset and go for a walk and write and get some exercise at the same time. And of course, walking and exercise can fuel your creativity and help you get unblocked if you're feeling a little bit stuck about the direction of your story or your writing. Lesson number 3, test your ideas. So this particular lesson is more relevant for non-fiction authors. If you're a creator or you want to write online, think in terms of a minimal viable product or MVP. This is a concept from the startup world. The concept comes from the company Dropbox. Basically, before Dropbox built its file sharing software and became a hugely successful business, they developed a prototype video of how Dropbox would work in theory. And this video was widely shared and circulated in media that tech geeks like me used to read and watch. And there was a waiting list of subscribers and customers who wanted access to the product. And this was enough validation for the Dropbox team to go ahead and invest in building Dropbox. Now, you may not be building software, but if you're going to write a book, it can take months and it can cost several $1,000s if you're going to work with an editor and book cover designer. So consider testing your ideas as you go so you can figure out what works. Now, how can you do this? Well, if you're a non-fiction author, I always recommend writing some of your book chapters, but then reworking them so they read as standalone articles. Then you can publish them on successful blogs online. Or if you don't want to pitch a blog, you can just publish them on Medium. That way you can start to get immediate feedback from your target audience. And then you can use this to improve the ideas in your work. Plus, when the time comes to actually turn this chapter into something that you're going to use as part of the book, you will already have written it and have some feedback that you can use during the editing process. Even if you're a fiction author, you can do this. You can use platforms like Wattpad to post extracts from your story and get feedback from readers. Lesson number 4. I wish I'd separated writing and revision. My favorite story of a successful author is the American journalist and essayist Joan Didion. So when Joan Didion would finish one of her stories or one of her collection of essays, she didn't immediately start editing it and fixing all the grammar issues and typos and other mistakes. Instead, she did something a little bit odd. She'd take her printed manuscript and stash it in the freezer. She'd leave it in the freezer for days, weeks, and even months. And then when she'd completely forgotten about all of the mistakes inside of it, she'd take it out and go through it and mark it up with her pen and fix the mistakes and then rewrite it. That's something you can do too. So rather than writing a first draft or dictating your first draft and then immediately jumping into the editing process, instead consider separating writing and revision by a couple of hours, days, or even weeks. This will make it easier for you to spot the mistakes in your work, and you'll also feel less emotional about cutting sections that work or don't work. And you'll also feel less emotional when you need to cut a section that isn't working but which took you a long time to write. Lesson number 5. I wish I'd hired an editor sooner. So years ago when I wrote my first book, it was called 33 Lessons for a Productive Writer. Now at the time I was writing on the side and I also had a job as a copywriter, but I didn't have much money. And when I discovered it would cost me at least $1,000 to hire an editor, I threw my hands up and I said, you know what? I trained as a journalist. I can edit my own book. And I did edit my own book and I published it on Amazon and I thought that was a job well done. But then something strange happened. People bought the book, which was fantastic, and it was encouragement for me. But then a few of them started emailing me and said, Brian, I liked the book, but there was a couple of mistakes in it. There was a few typos and a few sections that I was unsure about. So I went through the book again and I read through it And I discovered the mistakes and I was embarrassed by them. Couldn't quite believe I'd missed them. So I took the book down, I rewrote it, and then I hired an editor and then republished the book and fixed all of those mistakes. I wish I'd hired an editor sooner, even if it had meant delaying the publication of my book. To be honest, even when I wrote my latest book, which is called I Can't Believe I'm a Dad, I hired an editor to help me with this book, and I hired a proofreader. In fact, I hired 2 different proofreaders, but I still wish I'd worked with an editor sooner because I spent quite a long time line editing particular sentences when I should have got feedback from the editor about the structure of the book first. In other words, when you're working with an editor, they're going to give you feedback about the entire structure of your book before you go in and fix chapters, paragraphs, and sentences. However, if you try and do this all yourself, you could make the mistake that I made, whereby you find yourself fixing sentences and then reworking paragraphs and then saying this chapter is not working and then moving around sections in your book. And to be honest, it's like moving deck chairs on the Titanic and you're not going anywhere. Plus, when you hire an editor, you get something else. You're also investing in your craft as a writer. Even if the book doesn't sell a lot of copies, and I'll talk about that in a moment, you're still learning more about the book writing process and you're still getting yourself an education which will improve your writing skills and help you with the next book. Lesson number 6. Set a budget for publishing your book in advance. Writing a book is fun. It's creative and you get to spend time working with the written word. What's not to enjoy about that? So the prospects of setting a budget for your book is probably off-putting. But here's the thing, your book is still a product that you need to release out into the world, and like any good product, it should give readers what they want. So you need to invest in creating something that you're happy to publish and sell. That means budgeting for at least these 3 services. You'll need a book cover designer who can create something that will sell your book on Amazon and other bookstores. You could buy a pre-made book cover for a little under $100. That may work if you're, tight on budget. And then if you have a little bit more, you could hire a book cover designer who can create something for you for around $1,000. Or you could use an outsourcing service like 99 Designs. I've tried all of those 3 options and I had the best results when I hired a professional book cover designer who created a bespoke cover for my book. And it's something I've done for other books since then. You also need to invest in an editor, as I mentioned in the video. Now you can pay a lot or a little for an editor. It depends what services you want. If you acquire a developmental edit whereby they look at the structure of your book, it may cost between $1,000 and $2,000 depending on the genre and the word count. Or you may just simply want a line editor who can help you fix and copy edit your sentences. I would also recommend that you set money aside for working with a proofreader. Some editors will proofread, but don't confuse the 2 different services. They are different. Somebody cannot proofread your book and developmental edit or provide a developmental edit at the same time. The developmental edit comes first and the proofread comes last. So do factor that into your budget. And again, you can spend between $1,000 and $2,000 depending on the word count and genre. You may also want to invest in some software for writing your book or for publishing it. Most self-publishing software is free or pretty cheap to use these days. I mean, you could just write it in Google Docs or Microsoft Word, but at some point you need to take that manuscript and turn it into a format that you can use on Amazon and other bookstores. Personally, I use the book design service Vellum. It's software that's Mac only and costs $249. If it's Mac only and you're looking for software, you could use Scrivener, although there is a bigger learning curve for using Scrivener, particularly if you want to format it for Amazon KDP. Ulysses can also help you format your book, and I've reviewed Ulysses on this channel. Or you could just simply hire a book designer who will lay out your book for you and take care of all of those issues. So in summary, your budget for your book will cost you anywhere between $1,000 and several $1,000 depending on how much you want to spend and invest in it. Now that may seem like a lot to invest in up front, but consider this, your book is something permanent, it goes with your name, and when people search for you in Google, it's what will appear. It's also part of your back catalogue. It's not just a blog post, it's something that you're going to be proud of and something that you're going to stand by for years to come. So do take a little bit of time to consider how much you want to invest in your book, work out some basic figures, and that will help you create a product that you're happy to sell and which readers are happy to buy. Lesson number 7. I wish I had set deadlines for my book. So when you're working as a self-published author, nobody is going to say to you, when is your book ready? Nobody is going to ask you, when can I see the next draft? It's up to you to drive the progress of your book. Now, of course, the exception is if you already have readers who are invested in seeing you complete a series. But if you're new, you probably don't have this yet. I'd encourage you to set meaningful deadlines that you can follow. Now, I don't mean a deadline like I'm going to publish my book in 6 months' time, because there's a famous law from the productivity world called Parkinson's Law. It states that work will expand to fill all of the available hours to it. So if you give yourself 6 months to write a book, it'll take 6 months. If you give yourself a year, it'll take a year. If you give yourself 3 years, it'll take 3 years. And if you give yourself 12, like George R. Martin of Game of Thrones, it'll probably take more than that. So instead, what I'd like you to do is set smaller milestones for your book that you can tick off one by one. So you could say, for example, by Monday of next week, I will have written chapter 1 of Act 1. By Monday of next month, I will have completed the first draft of Act 1. And by 2 months' time, I will have a draft ready that I can send to my editor. I'd also encourage you, when you're setting deadlines, to get in touch with your editor sooner. So when I finished writing a subsequent book, not my first book, I thought that an editor would be able to pick it up straight away. I found an editor that I was happy to work with, but then I was surprised because she told me that she had a lot of other clients she was working with and she couldn't start editing my book immediately. In fact, she had a waitlist that was going to take 6 to 8 weeks, and that delayed the publication of my book. And clearly this was time that I could have used or managed better if I really wanted to take writing seriously. So engage your author sooner and work with them to figure out what deadlines are realistic for sending them drafts of your book. And when I started doing this for subsequent books, I also discovered that editors are happy to look at sections of your book, even if the entire book isn't quite ready. In other words, you could send them Act 1, even if you haven't written Act 2 or Act 3. And this will help you break your book down into smaller milestones that you can tick off one by one and then get ready to publish a book that you're proud of. The 8th and final lesson that I learned from writing multiple books is this: the value lies in your back catalogue. Now, I learned this lesson from writing my books and seeing my book sales gradually increase over the years. But I also learned it because I started a podcast several years ago. I've interviewed over 150 authors of various types. I've interviewed indie authors, genre fiction authors, and New York Times best-selling authors. And with a few notable exceptions like James Clear, who's hugely successful and whose books appear in the airport, most authors who are earning a full-time living are not earning a full-time living from their last book or from one book. No, instead the authors who are earning a good living from their books have a huge back catalogue that sells consistently. In fact, I interviewed David Farland a few months ago, and he told me that he earns consistent revenue from books that he's written 5 and 10 years ago. Because the best way to promote your last book is to write the next one. Who knows what your books or what books in your back catalogue could sell or resonate with readers. If you want to write one book, that's fine. You can move on with your life and tick becoming an author off your bucket list. But if you want to build a career as an author, then writing books is part of your job, and writing books is something that you're going to do. You're going to create a publication schedule whereby you're going to write one book a year or one book every 6 months or whatever cadence works for you and your readership. And you're going to do this knowing that it's going to take some time to turn that flywheel and before you can start earning a good living from your books. Those are just 8 lessons that I learned from writing my books. If you found this video helpful, let me know in the comments section below. And if you'd like more videos like this, or you have questions about becoming an author, please also ask me below. And if you want to get more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.